Today we're diving into the absolutely shocking life story of a small Australian marsupial. And this isn't just a nature documentary curiosity. It's a story that comes from a really fascinating scientific investigation that reveals why, for this little guy, the red-tailed phascogale, the drive to reproduce is a truly fatal attraction.
And no, that's not an exaggeration. The male of this species has a reproductive strategy that is so intense, so all-consuming, that it literally ends its life every single time. It's a biological command: mate until you die.
So, to really get what's going on here, we first have to look at the male's absolutely brutal, super accelerated life cycle out in the wild. I mean, this is a life lived at full throttle, with no brakes, heading straight for a biological brick wall.
You know, this isn't just some weird fluke of nature. It's a defined biological strategy, and it's called semelparous. The best way to think about it is like putting all of your evolutionary chips on one single massive bet. For the phascogale, that means one frantic, glorious breeding season, and then that's it. Game over.
The truly unbelievable part is just how fast this all happens. A male is born, he hits adulthood at 9 months, and then, by just 11 months old, he enters his first and only mating season. A few weeks later, before he even hits his first birthday, the entire male population just dies off.
So what's actually killing them? Well, it's their own bodies turning against them. Their internal stress management system completely breaks down. The biological off switch for stress hormones just fails. This floods their systems with toxic levels of cortisol, leading to just catastrophic internal damage, like fatal stomach ulcers and hemorrhages.
Okay, so that's the grim picture in the wild, but this brings us to the central puzzle of our story. What happens when you take these animals out of that environment, when you get rid of the predators in the competition and bring them into a protected, captive setting?
And wow, this chart just says it all. In the wild, they barely make it a year. But in captivity, they can live for more than 2 years. They actually survive their first breeding season, even though they become infertile afterwards. It's a completely different outcome.
So you'd think, okay, problem solved, right? A safe home means a longer life. Well, as the researchers suspected, the answer is way more complex, and frankly, a whole lot more interesting than it looks on the surface. So the scientists decided to give these surviving captive males a full-on health checkup. They wanted to see if this second chance at life came with some kind of hidden cost. Was there a trade-off happening that wasn't immediately obvious?
And at first glance, from the outside, everything looked pretty good. Those fatal ulcers they get in the wild, nowhere to be found. Yeah, they had some mild hair loss during breeding, but it grew back. They even regained their body weight. On the surface, they looked like they were doing great.
But this is where the real detective work kicks in. Because if they look fine on the outside, what story would their blood tell? What was happening on a cellular level that the naked eye just couldn't see?
And boom, here it is, the first major clue, right there in their blood. The researchers looked at lymphocytes. These are super important white blood cells, basically the backbone of your immune response. And just look at that difference. In females, they made up 77% of their white blood cells, but in the males, that number crashes down to just 51%. That's a huge, significant drop.
And there's actually a clinical name for this pattern. It's called a stress leukogram. It's a clear biological signature, a big red flag in the blood work that confirms that even without the pressures of the wild, these males are going through an intense, overwhelming internal stress response. Their bodies are still acting like they're in that frantic life-or-death mating frenzy.
So to truly solve this puzzle, the investigation had to go even deeper, not just into the blood, but into the very headquarters of the immune system itself. And this is where the hidden cost of their survival was finally, truly revealed. The spleen, which is basically the immune system's command center, told the whole story. In the females, it was healthy, active, ready to go. But in the males, it showed something called white pulp atrophy. In other words, their immune headquarters was totally worn out and depleted. Now get this, the spleens of 1.5-year-old males were more degraded than the spleens of 3.5-year-old females. Insane.
This whole phenomenon has a name. It's called immunosenescence. It's the aging and deterioration of the immune system. But here's the absolute kicker. For the phascogale, this isn't being caused by the slow march of time. It's being hyper-accelerated by the intense stress of that one reproductive cycle. Stress is literally hitting the fast-forward button on the aging of their immune system.
This is a perfect way to put it. That single, intense breeding season
forces the male's entire immune system into a sudden, premature retirement. Even though the rest of his body keeps chugging along for another year or so, its defenses have already packed their bags and shut down for good.
So, after all that, why does this one tiny, kinda weird marsupial matter so much? Well, solving this biological mystery gives us some incredible insights that go way beyond this single species.
I mean, first off, the phascogale gives us a perfect, if pretty extreme model for studying the links between stress and our immune systems. It's also a textbook case of an evolutionary trade-off, sacrificing long-term survival for that short-term reproductive success. And since this species is listed as near-threatened, understanding all this is vital for conservation. Plus, it gives us fascinating clues into how aging can work so differently between the sexes.
And that really leaves us with a final thought to chew on. Our lives are, thankfully, much less extreme than the phascogales. But its story is a pretty dramatic warning, isn't it? It really makes you wonder, what are the hidden, long-term costs that stress might be quietly inflicting on our own immune systems day in and day out?